सभा की कार्रवाई अनिश्चित काल के लिए स्थगित की जाती है। धन्यवाद।
The winter session of Parliament ends a week ahead of schedule.
All right, so the big questions that we ask at the back of the news report that you just saw: are our MPs working less? Is the Parliament simply getting more productive? Because there's a dichotomy there. Less number of debates, but high number of bills that are passed. The Parliament a rubber stamp for the Modi government is another question, as opposition failed in its duties as well. I want to cut across to our guest this evening. I have with me Jayaprakash Narayan, founder, Lok Satta Movement; Shehzad Poonawala, Bharatiya Janata Party spokesperson, in the studio with me; Syed Naseer Husain, Dr. Husain, Congress spokesperson as well; and Rahul Shrivastava, National Affairs editor. Mr. Narayan, I just want to go through some figures, and I'm sorry, we are rattling off figures here, but 35 bills were pending in Parliament. Of these, only 7 bills were listed for consideration and passing. 16 of those were listed for introduction. Before the winter session came to an end, only 9 bills were introduced and just 7 passed. Is this prima facie healthy democracy?
Preeti, the answer is self-evident. So instead of may, let me go into some potential solutions which are acceptable across the aisle. We all recognize, and I think it's established today, Rahulji and as you mentioned, from 120 days in the early years of independence, today we come down to around 60 days in Parliament, and state assemblies are much worse. 21 days on average, I don't know if you're aware. In recent times, the average duration is 21 days. There are states where it has come down to even 6 days. So legislatures in general have lost their relevance, except constitutionally they're mandated to be there, and without them the government cannot survive. Without them there's no budget or law. Part of it is structural. Structural because Westminster model that we adopted basically means that once the government is drawn from the legislature, which is the only legitimate body that draws the mandate from the people. No other body in the country has a mandate from the people. The union legislature, the parliament, and the state legislature. Everybody else is a derivative body. They have no legitimacy, democratic legitimacy without the legislature. Despite that constitutional fact, the reality is once the government survives as long as it commands a majority in the House, both in the national level and the state level, the word used, rubber stamp, has been true for the past 50 years in India. It's a structural issue, and it's been further compounded by the way we ran our democracy. And unless we look at the reasons why we ran our democracy that way, I don't think we'll find a solution. I'll quickly mention them. But before that, when we choose to do so, our parliament does debate brilliantly. In the last 10 years, I remember 2 occasions vividly when there was really a wholesome debate with an attempt to reconcile conflicting views and bring about a consensus. One is the Lokpal bill in 2013. The debate was excellent. The second was the GST bill in 2017, I think. Both were exceptional in the last 10 years. But these are exceptional. That's why we remember them. I almost cannot name another debate in the last 10 years of the same quality or the wholesomeness, because Parliament is supposed to be a body to reconcile conflicting views. But what we did is we converted the Parliament into lawyer jargon in Afghanistan. Pardon my saying so. Because once the numbers are there, once there is 10th Schedule and Anti-Defection Act, well-intentioned though it might be, we made debate irrelevant in Parliament. The voting is blind as per the party's dictates, irrespective of the merits of the law. I can cite any number of instances, you know and I know. I don't want to go into details now. We all understand, irrespective of which party is in power. And the 10th Schedule really didn't stop the defections, but actually throttled the freedom of the members. And it probably altered the history of India by the Muslim Women's Bill, which led to the grievous consequences in India by overcompensating, and the Ramaswamy impeachment case, which led to Parliament losing its authority over judiciary, accountability of judiciary. So it has had grievous consequences, and most of all in parliamentary debates and the relevance of Parliament. The second is the Speaker's institution. G.V. Maulankar, he did a remarkable job. He was as good as any speaker in the House of Commons. So from 1946, the Central Legislative Assembly, later to the legislative part of the Constituent Assembly, later the interim Parliament and the Provisional Parliament, and later the first Parliament of India, 52 to 56, until he passed away. He was an exceptional speaker. But that quality we declined because we refuse to isolate the speaker from the ruling party. Notionally, he or she may have resigned from the ruling party. The reality is they always are more than willing to go back to government or the treasury benches. And they always going back. Oftentimes, they even became chief ministers in states. We have not followed the British practice. I don't want to go into details unless there's an occasion later.
Right.
The second thing is, we completely failed in institutionalizing some mechanisms to make the government accountable. Prime Minister's question. No, we take hours and hours of meaningless, meandering debate without the cut and thrust of parliamentary forum and making it really attractive and meaningful, in depth. And finally, the committee system is practically very ineffective. States, though, it's more or less ineffective. Union level, it's better than the parliament's functioning, but committees are not genuinely empowered. Woodrow Wilson said, Parliament, he talked about the US Congress. Congress in session is Congress in exhibition. Congress in committees is Congress at work. It's good that the parliamentary committees work, but they're not adequately empowered. At best, they're advisory in nature. And of course, it's all in camera for good reasons,
Right.
I suppose. In this country, the moment media people are there, it appears the members of parliament want to really show their muscle rather than their depth of knowledge and brain, because that's what gets news coverage. And that's what the party bosses want. We can change it if
Right.
we really want it. We don't seem to want it irrespective of who is in power. And it's nice to blame each other and get on with the business as usual.
Well, Mr. Narayan, I appreciate you bringing down the temperatures down in the studio a little